We are picking up with some material about punishment from chapter 9. And let me share some slides with you. All right. So as I said, I want to talk a little bit about some of the problems with punishment. Your book has a list of things. The 4th edition, it starts on page 374. And some of this list, sorry, it doesn't. It's a different page, 368. There's some things on that list that are a little different from my list. They're all relevant, though, okay? Now, in your book, they're going to talk about problems just with punishment in general. You know, the fact that, well, if you're simply punishing one behavior but forgetting to reinforce an appropriate behavior, that's not as helpful as it could be, right? But my list I want to talk about just quickly is really the issues that come specifically with positive punishment. And in my email, I said, this kind of boils down to the spanking wars. It's funny because they say, you know, oh, if you don't know people, never talk about religion or politics because those could be heated topics. I feel like I can talk about that stuff all day with people, but when you get to how to discipline children, people get really kind of hot under the collar and they have very strong feelings about it. You know, should you spank your kid? Some people are like, never, it's the worst thing you can do. Some people are like, I was spanked and I'm fine, and that's the only way to raise kids. People have really strong opinions on it. Now, the American Psychological Association also has an opinion, and it's based on data. And basically, you don't need to do it. There are more effective ways, and there are problems with positive punishment. Sure, you know, people are spanked and they're fine. I was spanked, I think I'm fine. But it does lend itself to some specific problems, including abuse, if you go overboard. So we're going to take a minute and talk about some of the issues with positive punishment. And again, this might be hitting. Anything that induces pain certainly is going to be a problem. Okay. First of all, you know, and using either parenting or pet ownership works. Much difference, right? So if you're going to hit your dog as a punishment, or you're going to hit your kid, one of the things you risk is that your child or your pet is just going to learn to be afraid of you. Now, typically, that is not the kind of relationship we're going for as a parent. We don't want them to hate us or fear us. Now, obviously, there's some parents that don't care, and we already know they're pretty awful parents. So, but that's what you risk when you use a positive punishment, especially one that induces pain. And so you may have a child that doesn't want to be around you or is afraid of you. So that is a risk. The fact that the punishment may elicit such a strong emotional reaction from, again, the child or the pet, kind of distracts them from what the heck they're supposed to be learning. So there's an issue with that. You can get pain-induced aggression. Kind of like, you know, we talked about extinction-induced aggression. Well, this, especially from pain or just punishment in general, you can get aggression. Now, think about it. If you're disciplining a 4-year-old and they get aggressive, you can probably handle it. And that 4-year-old becomes 16, 17, 18. They're taller than you. They're bigger than you. And you're still using some kind of like hitting as positive punishment discipline. They're going to start hitting back eventually, and you may lose. So that's certainly an issue. Now, the other thing is you're modeling as an adult. You're basically saying this is an appropriate way to behave. You know, kids and pets, well, kids now, they do what you do, not what you say. One of my sort of all-time favorite, but not favorite things in the show called Super Nanny, where there's a lot of parenting going on and a lot of operant conditioning, is a dad who's trying to discipline his kid and takes his kid's hand and he hits the kid's hand and he says, "We don't hit," which of course is hilarious because the dad just hit his kid. So basically you're teaching children this is what adults do. We hit each other, we yell at each other, and that's how adults behave. So you're modeling that this is a behavior that the child is now going to do to their peers, you know, and when they're parents, it's possible they're going to pick up on this. They probably will. There are studies that show correlation. People that report that their parents use corporal punishment, the more that that was part of the discipline, there is a negative correlation that with lower IQ. Now, if you guys have taken research methods, you know, large sample sizes, you can get weak correlations pretty easily, but still it's something to think about. The problem with punishment, and specifically things like spanking, is it does work in that the parent is typically trying to stop a behavior, right? So the kid's doing something that he's told not to do or whatever, he gets in trouble. Well, he just gets spanked. He's now crying or doing something, but he's not doing the behavior that the parent was trying to stop. So the parent is highly reinforced for this behavior and is a positive or negative reinforcement. I hit my kid, they stopped doing whatever it was they were doing. It takes away this annoying thing to me. It takes away the behavior. So it's a negative reinforcer to the punisher. So it's very strong. Also, when you get into people, if you actually get into one of these conversations, you know, you have people that are strong advocates of, oh, it's okay to, you know, hit your kid. Probably their parents did it, and they've probably been doing it themselves a long time. Now, we know from looking at factors that affect extinction, how the history of a behavior matters. So if you've been doing something for years, it's very hard to change that. You're just used to it, and it's worked for you as a punisher. It's actually said, well, my kid, you know, stop doing it. And so you'll find all degrees of variation too. Sometimes I know parents will say, well, we only do it if my kid's, if it's a safety issue. So if he's about to run out into the street, I'll give him a little smack on the bottom, and that, you know, because I need him to quickly not do that. But I wouldn't use it for some other, you know, infraction, like he didn't pick up his toys, I'll use something else. You'll see a whole range of things. Now, this did come up about fall of 2014. I think it was Adrian Peterson, one of those football players that, you know, it was national news because he used to switch to discipline his 4-year-old to the point where the kid had welts on him. And, you know, this is big news and everything. And really, that was finally when APA, they had already had a position paper on this, where it's like therapists should not encourage corporal punishment, basically hitting your children, as effective discipline. That we basically know there are issues with this, and there are better methods. And sometimes, I mean, I think before that case, used to dance around a little bit. Well, yeah, you know, but it's kind of bad, and maybe you shouldn't do it. Now, there's really no reason to dance around it. We have the data. It's ineffective. It's, well, it is immediately effective, right? So there's this wish to use it. There are just so many issues and possible side effects that, and better ways to discipline. There are better ways to change behavior. And that's usually what we want. We want to decrease one behavior and increase an alternative behavior. And you can do that without spanking and hitting. So why not? And then you don't risk all these side effects. You don't risk the fact that if that's the only tool in your tool shed and your kid's getting older and a little swat on the butt doesn't hurt anymore, what are you going to do? Hit them harder? Are you going to start punching them? Like, what exactly do you do next? So there are much more effective ways. You can do negative punishment. You have to do it effectively. It's in your book, and you've done a worksheet on effective punishment. You know, the consequence has to be something the child actually cares about. I'll give you an example. We use a lot of, you know, negative punishment. So we take things away from our kids, like privileges, or you don't get dessert, or whatever. And it's effective. It works really well, and you don't have to raise your voice and get all emotional, and nobody's in pain and freaking out because the person they thought loved them is hurting them. You know, pretty effed up if you think about it. So, like with my own kids, you know, I haven't had to do this in a while. They're little and they're like scrolling around, not doing what you say. You know, brush your teeth. You're not brushing your teeth. I'll say, look, if you don't brush your teeth right now, you're going to lose something. And my son would go, what will I lose? And I would say, give me a second. And I'd have to think, like, does he care about today? Like, if I took away the Wii for 2 or 3 days, his video game, would he care? If I took away this, would he care? Because it changes all the time. Sometimes they're like, that's worth it. I'm going to keep doing my bad behavior. So I'll think of something. Now, if I'm more on it, I don't even have to get into the punishment thing. If my kids aren't doing what they want them to do, I can say, well, how can I reinforce what I want them to do? And so we would say things like, hey, whoever brushes their teeth first gets to choose what we eat for dinner tomorrow. I mean, really stupid stuff, right? And they'd be like, hey, and they'd go and they brush their teeth. So in that instance, I could avoid the punishment altogether, which is even better. But obviously, you do fall into times when you need punishment, and removing things usually works very well as long as it's something the kid cares about. It's done immediately. It's appropriate for the level of the misbehavior. You know, all those effective punishment things. You follow through on it. One of my stories is he was doing something and it was one of these, oh, you're going to get in trouble and something's going to happen. And he says, what is it? And for whatever reason, this was a time when I thought, like, okay, I need to win this battle. This punisher has to be something, you know, severe enough that he's really going to follow through and not just take the punishment I come up with, because then that doesn't work. So whatever it was, I said, if you don't do what I asked, I'm not going to let you play baseball this spring. And as soon as I said it, I thought, oh, crap, you know, like, I hope he chooses to do what I want, because I really don't want to follow through on that, but I have to. Punishment is useless. If you don't follow through on it, it's not punishment, it's nothing. And he looked at me and he's like, fine. And, you know, and I was like, okay, that worked. I mean, that was a pretty high magnitude punisher, but for whatever reason, I had decided that this was the moment that we were like, and I had to win. So there you go. All right, let's go back to some of our slides here. We're going to hit some more issues in punishment. Theories. Let's see how quickly we can do this. It's in your book, so I want you to read it. There's 3, and the first 2 seem very similar, but there's one tiny difference. Remember, this is the class. It's about those tiny differences. All right, conditioned suppression. What that says is you're doing a certain behavior. Let's say kids are scrolling around and jumping on the couch. And I throw out a punishment. I'll just use positive punishment, even though it has problems, just to, it's a good example. Let's say I say, shut up, you're driving me crazy, right? And they're like, you're gonna get in trouble. And I throw out there, you don't stop jumping on the couch, you get no dessert tonight. So I throw that out there. Now the question in theories of punishment is, why does the behavior decrease? What is it about that consequence, no dessert, that causes the behavior to go down? The conditioned suppression theory answers that question by saying the punishment produces an emotional response that upsets the person being punished. So the child that was jumping on the couch is now upset because they might not get dessert. And they're so emotional and upset, maybe just internally, that they basically stop doing everything. So conditioned suppression is the punishment triggers an emotional response that basically interferes with the child doing anything at all. And if they're not doing much, then they're also not doing the punished behavior. So it says the behavior decreases because all behavior decreases. All behavior is suppressed. Now, having doled that out once and the kid's like, oh, I'm not going to do anything. Now, later, if they're like another day, they're jumping on the couch and they hear me coming, then that kind of fear of like, oh, we're going to get in trouble, they stop doing everything. But the key with this is you see all behavior suppress, decrease. I put like CER. Remember the conditioned emotional response? That's the rat that's working for food in the cage. Light comes on and then he gets a shock. And he learns this, so when the light comes on, he stops. And he stops pressing his lever, but he stops doing everything. He just stops behaving. He's just like, well, that's what this one's like. Now, another one says, it's not just all behavior goes down, but just the punished behavior decreases in order to remove the fear of being punished. This is the same 2-process theory of avoidance. You guys did a worksheet on it. I guess it was last week because it was on your week 3 exam. And with the snake, and she was afraid of snakes, so she went a different path and it reduced her fear. Same thing, avoidance theory of punishment is you're classically conditioned to fear the punishment. And then when you think of doing that behavior that would be punished, so the kid thinks about, ooh, I want to jump on the couch. They're nervous about being punished. So by choosing to do any other behavior and avoiding that behavior, they reduce their fear. It's negatively reinforced. Okay, so that's the explanation for why does a punished behavior go down? Because by avoiding that behavior and doing some other behavior, I lose my fear of punishment. All right. The last one is just the PREMAC. PREMAC says, well, we know reinforcement is if you do the less preferred behavior, you are allowed to do the high. So punishment for PREMAC would say, well, if you know the reverse is true, if you know the reverse is, if I watch my TV show, then I have to study. I may, knowing that's the contingency, I may choose not to watch the TV show and then forego the studying. Maybe a better example would be if I make a really nice dinner, like I cook all this stuff, then I'm going to have to clean the dishes. So you know what? Knowing that contingency is in place, I decide, forget the dinner, I'll just have a bowl of cereal. And then I don't have to do the dishes. So I don't have to deal with the punishment. So PREMAC answers the question, why does a punished behavior decrease? Well, essentially we're avoiding the low probability behavior by not doing the high probability behavior. We know these things. We know this is how it works. If I do this thing I want to do, I'm going to have the outcome. If I don't want that outcome, you don't do the initial behavior. So these are the three things you need to be able to recognize them. So let's practice this. Here's an example. You can pause the video if you want to read it. All right, so let's see. He catches him eating his leftovers. He knows he'll be mad, so he decides to do something else. All right, so for conditioned suppression, we need to see all behavior suppressed. I don't see all behavior suppressed. I see him not doing a specific behavior, which is he's not going to eat the leftovers. And the fact that he's not going to eat the leftovers means he's no longer nervous. He's lost his nervousness. So to me, this sounds like avoidance theory, okay? There's only one behavior decreasing, which is eating leftovers. He's not going to do it. And he's not doing it specifically so he won't feel nervous. Okay, let's try another one. Jay knows if he invites Dustin to the movie, Dustin will talk all the time. Oh, I gave you the answer. Okay. Basically, if I do this behavior, this is the consequence that will follow. So I'm not going to do the behavior. I'm not going to invite this guy because he'll just talk. So I just won't invite him. So that would be PREMAC principle. Okay. Here's a few more PREMAC. I know these things are true. So if, I'm not going to sleep in because I won't be able to park. So sleeping in decreases because of the threat of the punishment, no parking spot. If I go outside, I'm going to just be all allergy. So I don't go outside, right? And the thing is, I know the contingency ahead of time. I know the rule. I know how it works. So I choose not to do the behavior. In PREMAC, that's how punishment works. All right, what about this one? All right, someone talked in class and she got some weird reactions. It was really embarrassing. So basically, she inhibited all her behavior. She only she stopped saying things in class. She might have also not moved as much. She might not have taken as many notes. It's like she just kind of shut down. That, of course, would be conditioned suppression. Okay, so hopefully you see the difference between, suppression is all behavior decreases. Avoidance theory is one behavior decreases. And then PREMAC is also one behavior decreasing, but it's because you know ahead of time what the rule would be, and you just don't want the consequence. So the difference between PREMAC and avoidance theory is avoidance has to do with getting rid of nervousness. PREMAC is like, I just don't want to do that consequence, so don't do the behavior. All right, next topic, learned helplessness. You guys should remember this from Psych 110. This is when there was dogs and two groups of dogs, and they were both getting shocked, but one of them could turn the shock off and one of them couldn't. And the ones that couldn't, so in the first phase, they're just randomly getting shocked and they don't have any control over it. Went later then in the experiment, when they could escape the shock, the dogs that had no control in the first phase don't escape the shock. It's like they've given up. They've learned to give up. Now the dogs in the no escape group, and you'll need to read this in the textbook to kind of get a handle or remind you of the setup. This is non-contingent punishment. They're getting shocked for and non-contingent, it's not connected to their behavior. Remember, non-contingent reinforcement was when we just get free stuff. We didn't do anything. We're just like, oh, isn't that nice? I got a birthday present, even though I'm a horrible person. It's just free stuff you get and not connected to behavior. Same with punishment and learned helplessness. Bad things happen to you and it's not your fault. That happens to us, right? Life, that happens. We get sick, accidents happen, we lose loved ones. It's nobody's fault. It happens. It's non-contingent punishment. Well, in this group of dogs, and now they can do it in rats, and of course we apply it to people. Later, when they're in a situation where they could do a behavior to get out of the bad situation, they don't. It's like they've learned to give up. Okay? Now in humans, this was seen as maybe a good model of depression. Maybe people, so many bad things happen to them, and not all depressions would fit this pattern, but sometimes it does. We basically give up. And so this could also be difficult tasks. If you give people, this is so mean, but in experiments, if you give people math problems to solve that are unsolvable, or puzzles that you can't solve, which is mean, but you give them a few of those, and then you give them ones that are actually pretty easy, they just give up. They're like, screw it, I can't do anything right. So you can induce this in humans pretty easily. And difficult tasks, when things are hard, we may give up because it's hard, and yet we think, sometimes things are hard, but if you keep trying, you will make it. And so it's this balance. When should we give up because you can't solve the task? And when should we persevere? And you don't want to give up too soon. And sometimes people start giving up too soon when they really could help themselves out of a difficult situation, and they're not. So here are some things. I want you to read in your book really more about this. But some of the things, you could give people small tasks that they can accomplish. And then they build up the successes and then move on to harder and harder tasks. That would be great. When we're teaching, we should hope not to overwhelm people, but give them small, easier things. And then as they master that, get more and more difficult. And, but you have to persevere. You guys have to persevere because any of this stuff you can learn. It just feels like sometimes you're like, oh, I just can't get it, but you can, so don't give up. I will mention something, the antidepressants. So you can show this in rats where they get shocked and they can't turn it off. And then later, they won't escape the shock when they can. So you can build learned helplessness into rat. But if they give rats antidepressants for a couple of weeks before they do this experiment, the rats won't have learned helplessness. It's like it prevents it, which is really fascinating. And there's probably some really cool brain mechanisms going. Well, obviously there are. Everything we do is our brain. So I just want to kind of introduce that, but look at it in your book and we'll have some questions on a quiz. And I think that'll do it for us. I mean, the stuff's in your book, but I do like to make a few comments for you to kind of help, Sometimes students will tell me, oh, it's hard to read and get it. It's like my reaction to that is read it again, more carefully, slowly. If you need to be a better reader, then that's great practice. But I don't mind having a few videos to kind of try and reinforce or clear up a few things about the reading. But really, you do need to be able to get this. These are very short reading sections. They're very clearly written. It's just this, learning theory is like learning a new language. And so there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of terms, and that makes it a little bit, it's going to be slow reading. This is not summer beach novel reading, I get that. But really work on it, and I will be posting a quiz for you guys to work on. All right.